Good evening. Human rights activist Rachel Goldwyn has been unexpectedly freed just weeks into a 7-year jail term in Burma. Rachel from Barnes in southwest London was imprisoned for chaining herself to a lamppost and singing pro-democracy songs.
Singing a song on the streets of Burma. But what exactly made a young Londoner described as ordinary and whose hobbies included skydiving risk imprisonment on the other side of the world?
And she was only singing a song in a public place. She was doing like suffragettes did at the beginning of the century. She wasn't doing anything serious in our eyes.
I think it's very human to react against injustice. Obviously, if you're in the United Kingdom, you might join Amnesty International, for instance. But if you're actually in Burma or near Burma, perhaps on the borders in Thailand, then clearly you have the opportunity to get more directly involved.
Rachel's now planning to fly home with her mother and father, having achieved, if nothing else, massive publicity for a cause she believed was worth being jailed for. Graham Magin, Newsroom South East.
The gloves are off in the three-way fight to become Labour's candidate for Mayor of London. In the latest wrangle, Frank Dobson has been accused of securing unfair access to party lists in London, using them to lobby members for support.
Putting my boots and my Gore-Tex anorak and things on, but I thought it would be sort of slightly overdoing it just for coming to Regent's Park.
Frank Dobson may look relaxed, but since he entered the contest to become Mayor of London, it's been anything but a walk in the park. Now the former Health Secretary is being put on the spot about how he obtained lists of party members in the capital. The former Minister for London, Nick Rainsford, who launched his own bid for Mayor but then stepped aside in favour of Frank Dobson, says it's a lot of noise about nothing.
It is our opponents who don't want to argue on the policies, but are trying all the time to divert attention onto red herrings like this that are responsible for this storm in a teacup.
But Ken Livingstone is determined to be heard in what's turning out to be a war of words between him and Frank Dobson. Even with the Prime Minister's support, the former Health Secretary still has to convince enough party members in London to vote for him. And with recent reports the other candidate, Glenda Jackson, has the backing of John Prescott, the contest is far from being an open and shut case. Joanne Coburn, Newsroom South East, Westminster.
And finally, thousands of commuters have faced severe delays this evening after a power blackout caused train signals to fail. Trains to and from Paddington were badly affected due to an electronics failure on the line between Didcot and Swindon. All services through Didcot Parkway in Oxfordshire were suspended after power lines were brought down by high winds along the route. Services have now been restored. And that's it for the moment. We're back tomorrow morning in Breakfast News with regular travel and weather updates. And don't forget, there's South East News around the clock, and that's on CFAX, page 160. But from all the late team, a very good night to you.
Good evening to you. It's been a bit breezy up the channel today. We've had gusts of wind around the Solent up at 60 miles an hour. And it's still windy enough if you're on a cross-channel ferry to upset your supper. 50 miles an hour winds likely at least for the next hour or so before they start to ease off along the coasts of southeast England. And we stay with the southeast because here is also the warmest place, Gravesend reaching 18 degrees despite the breeze, well above the average of 11 for this time of year. The winds are easing in the south, but in the north they strengthen up again, and it's through the second half of the night and through tomorrow we'll probably see gale force winds back into much of the north of Scotland. Now here we have some outbreaks of rain. There's probably going to be a bit more of that to come across the more western parts, mostly in the form of showers, with a thicker cloud further south. The next little plume of rain drifting into the more southeastern counties, so not just the wind here, also a bit more rain and keeping it cloudy for much of the night. Where we see the holes in the cloud, we're likely to see figures drop to just 4 or 5 degrees, so quite a cold night to come in certain areas. And there's that wind freshening across the northern reaches of Scotland. A brief interlude, we're likely to see a little ridge of high pressure for much of tomorrow, so a much drier day, some sunshine as well, but the next warm system, the next weather system racing in to give some rain. In the south it remains dry, but in the north I think we're going to see those weather fronts close enough to give some outbreaks of rain. So to start the day tomorrow morning, there's the remnants of that little bit of cloud in the southeast, gradually moving out the way. For much of eastern England, there'll be some fine dry weather, but showers in the west and the western parts of Wales, and also some rain coming into Northern Ireland towards the end of the day, probably by dark, and plenty of showers across parts of Scotland. Temperatures here 11 or 12, come further south a bit colder than we saw today, 14 or 15 at best. And the forecast for Wednesday, well there's those gale force winds back into the northwest of Britain, some dry weather in some of the more sheltered eastern districts, and that weather system gradually creeping a little bit further down to the south during the course of Thursday. That's the forecast. Have a good evening.
the warning signals were already in place when the red light was passed.
It is a sin for a driver to go past a signal of danger. He does not do it voluntarily.
Panorama investigates Paddington, an accident waiting to happen, in half an hour on BBC One.
It ought not to be possible for two trains travelling at 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour to hit head-on in 1999.
How it all began now on BBC One, growing old disgracefully, the Victor way.
They say I might as well face